to welcome you back to another week on Conversations on Race and Police. I am your host, Marlo Brooks. I am a senior studying English at California State University of San Bernardino. So welcome. You guys already know that. Welcome back, everyone. And for the first time viewers, welcome. We have a great show ahead of us. One that's very needed in today's topics and today's time. A very special show, a very special episode. So please stay tuned tonight as we get through our special guests and their presentations, and for a very powerful, I'm assuming, Q&A session tonight as well. So welcome. First and foremost, I'm just reading my screen. First and foremost, congratulations to the Dodgers. That was a great championship game and series itself all around. First championship since 1988 for Los Angeles Dodgers. So that's a huge accomplishment, and one that I feel is much needed in the times that we're having, just to spark some type of hope and happiness for a lot of people across this nation as well. So congratulations to our Los Angeles Dodgers on the big win. Without me stalling too much, I'm sorry guys, I'm reading and talking at the same time. Without me stalling too much, we are going to kick things off with paying respects and homage to which the ground CSUSB sits on. So we recognize that California State University of San Bernardino sits on the territory and ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. We recognize that every member of the CSUSB community has benefited and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1965. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold CSUSB more accountable to the needs of American Indian and indigenous people. So thank you. So, not to give you guys too much of a playbook, you guys know the deal. Spike that Q&A button. If any of our presenters spark you with any questions tonight, don't forget to hit the Q&A button to ask questions. They are all ears for you guys tonight. They're here, they're opening their hearts. We're in a safe space. So definitely tune in and have a chat with these guys. Without giving too much away, we're gonna turn things over to Jerry. If you're there, Jerry.
Thank you.
Introductions today. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you so much, and thank you and all your colleagues for inviting us to share our views and our strong opinions with your discussion group. The members of this panel are very amazing people who, through lived experience, can share with the group why we are abolitionists. I'm going to start it out. After I speak will be Jitu Siddiqui, who was raised in South Central Los Angeles, experienced police terror at a very young age, had his brother killed, shot in the back by LAPD and Culver City PD, went to prison in the 70s, right, G2, or 80s?
76.
Okay.
1976.
And emerged a leader of the Black Liberation Movement and all that happened to him when he was inside. The list goes on, but his life experience speaks to his views of abolishing oppressive regimes. Then we go to Linda Evans, who I call a modern day hero. She's quite an amazing woman who really sacrificed her life based on her principles and what she believed. And a lot of people have principles, but not a lot of people give their life over to them. And Linda has, and she'll speak to that as well as her continued activism right now. She's a pretty amazing woman. So she did 16, 17 years in federal prison. And finally, Michelle Bernardino, the daughter of immigrants who puts her everything that she does is based on working not just for the immigrant community, but to empower, to help, to educate all of us about immigrants. She works with Honduran. She two parents. One is origin in Mexico, the other one in Honduras. So she has connections in both places. She crosses the border maybe 3 times a year with food and other necessities for a refugee camp. So another one of my heroes, amazing young woman. So with that, why don't I start? I thought of, what could we talk about that's better or more important than this question of public safety, especially in the times we live in, where our public safety is threatened everywhere you look. Police in the streets, the pandemic, the president, lack of health care, it goes on and on. And so to me, it was important to show why prisons, police, and ICE have absolutely nothing to do with public safety, even though that's what they shove down the throats of the public. Well, what about public safety? And laws are passed in the name of public safety that throw people away. So to me, my frame for public safety is that everyone has access to food, to housing, to healthcare, childcare, great education, tuition-free higher education, good paying jobs, access to recreation and art, and in short, that everybody has what everybody else has, that there's not a community that has all the goods and riches and privileges that another community doesn't have. So leveling the playing field is absolutely necessary for public safety. We will never have it unless we do that. So we're calling for the abolition of the prison industrial complex, and that's prisons, police, surveillance, ICE, because in fact, they have nothing to do with public safety. In the city of Los Angeles, as all cities across the country, they tell us that public safety is equated with an armed police force. And that is certainly not leveling the playing field, because this armed police force are armed and dangerous in cities where there is no privilege, in cities where people are oppressed, depressed, unemployed, homeless, etc. So, it's a lie that's being thrust down our throats. And the budget for the police in the city of Los Angeles is a bit less than $3.14 million. And that eats up close to 1/3 of the budget of the city. On top of that, Mayor Garcetti's budget for 2020 and 2021 devotes 54%, over half of that, of the city's unrestricted revenue. This could go to any department, mind you. Homeless, could go to healthcare. It goes to LAPD, which is just, it's outrageous. And it's so obvious when we look at these facts. So the total amount of the budget for LAPD, and because I'm speaking here just of LAPD, but the same applies to the sheriffs, ICE, all these departments, the total amount of the budget of LAPD far surpasses the $1.2 billion allotment that Garcetti begged the voters for so he could look like he was good on housing. That was to help the homeless. He was supposed to build 10,000 apartments for homeless residents over the course of the decade. And nothing really has happened towards that. In fact, he slashed the budget for Housing Community Investment Department, which oversees proposition HHH, which is what we voted on, it slashed the budget by $1.2 million. So it appears that he's slashed the budget entirely. The staffers are among the 16,000 civilian employees who will be furloughed to save money as city revenue has been decimated by the pandemic. What's really interesting about all this is that while there's furloughs and there's no building of these apartments or anything for the homeless, no care being taken of the homeless, LAPD officers with college degrees are receiving $41 million in bonuses. That's across the board, not each and every individual. But how more obvious can they be? $41 million while they're cutting monies for the homeless to build the apartments, to get them off the streets. So far better to criminalize them, which is what's happening now. LA, of course, is not unique in its spending patterns, but it gives us a real good picture of the ruling class definition of public safety. Police and more police. So where did that all come from? Where did the notion of police come from? How did it start? Well, it's really not a pretty picture, and I'm pretty sure most of you know about it. The modern police force started in 1900, but its origins go back to the colonies, the American colonies. Of course, in the South, in the 1700s, patrol groups were created to stop runaway slaves. In the North, a formal police force was created to control immigrants who were moving into cities. How outrageous. The beginnings of police are controlling and abusing people. People that are trying to escape from bondage are being hunted down by these slave patrols. There's a lot of ways we can look to what's happening today and see that it's not that much different. The first publicly organized police force with officers on duty full time came from Boston. What was happening in Boston, there was a lot of businesses and merchants there, and they hired people in the community to protect their property, to protect their businesses. But then they come up with a bright idea. Far better to have a police force that would be a former police force that they could pay with taxes from the community members. And they did so in the name of the common good. So, you know, it just outrages me so much. So let me go on. It's really hard to believe. Obviously, police forces were formed to protect private property, which is what they do today. And as we said, in the South, they were created to preserve the system of slavery. The patrols were tasked with chasing down runaway slaves and preventing slave revolts. People revolting against horrendous conditions were captured, beat, and threw back into slavery. The first slave patrol was created in the Carolina colonies in 1704. During the Civil War, they had the army to do the job of patrolling and acting as a police force around the slaves. You know, slavery in the South wasn't the end of it. In the North, the whole idea, the concept of slavery, enslavement of people was institutionalized with laws. The state and national government enacted more than 130 slave statutes between 1685 and 1689 and 1865. Slavery and the abuse of people of color was not merely a Southern affair, as we've all been taught to believe. Congress passed fugitive slave laws, leading up to the 1857 decision in the Dred Scott case, which basically said the Black man has no rights that the white man is bound to protect or respect. And that's our history. So hopefully we've made an argument for why police don't protect public safety, and that's why they are supposed to be, that's why they exist in the first place. But how do we organize to self-police? How do we organize to where we don't need police? Because there's plenty of arguments in communities that are over-policed by people who are abused by police, saying we need police, not all police are bad, and it goes on and on. And it's sad because some of the people who say that also say they need to just throw away the key, put all these young thugs in prison, throw away the key. We need more police. They call police. Well, and that's because they feel the need for public safety. And even though they're not getting it, that's the only thing offered them. Well, there's something that started in this country. I don't know the date when it began, but it's the development of CAT 911, or community alternatives to 911. In Southern California, they're building a network of community action teams that can respond to community needs as alternatives to 911. To me, this is so important. It's so hopeful. It's the beginning of people learning how to do for themselves, which is the future we want. I don't want police policing me. I want my comrades policing me, people that understand what it is that I'm dealing with. They're the ones that need to police me. So some of the, and I don't even like the use of the word police. It's more transformative justice of the way we deal with things. But some examples of what these CAT 911 or community action teams are doing, peace building around conflict resolution between individuals and groups in neighborhoods. So right now you have GRID in Los Angeles, which is under the LAPD, which are former gang members who mediate the problems amongst gangs, or between the gangs and the community. And many people call gangs street organizations, so let me do that. Obviously, they haven't been doing a great job because killings are going on in South LA. They haven't stopped. CAT 911 deals with police violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, mental health crisis, that's critically important, and acute first aid where paramedics are not available. Now, these aren't just words. They hold workshops. They hold workshops for sure monthly, but more often than that, on all of these things. So you learn what to do if there's an acute medical problem, or if there's how to intervene with, gang street organization discord, or between two people. What do you do to intervene? You don't come with a gun. You don't come with a battering ram. You come with an understanding because it's your community and you care. Teams work is based on a framework of transformative justice, which aims to create a world governed on principles of mutual respect, interrelatedness, and reciprocity rather than violence, domination, and disposability. The call to defund police is really a call towards self-governing communities. And to me, what's exciting is we're not just making the calls in the absence of activity. This is happening now. And there is no modern or kinder police force that can make the difference. Police are police. They have a job to do, and it is not to protect the public good. It's to protect property, and the history shows us that. So we're not trying to fight for better trained police or community policing. We are trying to have communities be able to police themselves And we're on our way to that. Now, the prison industrial complex is comprised of police, surveillance, the courts, and the prison itself. So when we're calling for the abolition of the prison industrial complex, we're really talking about reordering our society. The society now, which maintains inequality through oppression and privilege, through laws to protect private property, which translate into laws actually punishing those with no property. Because if you're hungry, you better not try to get food, because eating is not your right. It is not your right. Shelter is not your right. You don't have the right to sleep on a sidewalk. Laws are made to protect the community against people sleeping on the sidewalk. How do we reorder our society? Well, like I mentioned before, communities have been taking these steps for countless years. I think that G2 can speak to it, Linda can speak to it, and Michelle can speak to it. This is not new. There are organizations which will not engage in the fight for reformist reforms. And the only kind of reforms that people in our communities that want to make a difference engage in are those which minimize or subtract from the role of oppressive institutions. And there's a wonderful case in point in the county of Los Angeles. And that's how many people, there's just a few of us from the county of Los Angeles, I think, on the phone. But Proposition J, and hopefully you all have heard of it, this will structurally change the budget, directing money towards people's basic needs. Imagine that. At least 10% of the county's taxpayer money will go to community needs and alternatives to incarceration. And we're looking good. It's got a lot of support. I mean, the support of the LA Times, but it's an absolute step in the direction we have to take. So change is happening, and our job is to become part of that change and to reimagine a society where people's needs are primary. And I don't know if I can put it in chat, but I would like to direct people to three. There's a many websites, but three in particular lay the basis for what I've said. How would you suggest that I do that, Marlo?
You can add it into the chat so everyone can go to it. If it's a link,
Okay.
it'll go to it as well.
Sorry, I don't see chat, but I'll figure out how to do it. And
Okay.
with that, I want to turn this over to Linda. No, I'm sorry, G2, you're following. Beg your pardon, G2 and then Linda.
Greetings, everyone. I'm honored to be part of this series of events that students are having, or that the staff are providing for their students. I'm happy that Jerry invited me to participate in with it. I have to apologize ahead of time that I'm under the weather right now, so I won't be able to stay beyond my presentation. But if there's any questions that were directed specifically at me, if I have the opportunity to address those later, I will. Thank you to the staff, Marlo, and everyone for allowing us to present. I got to acknowledge Jerry and Linda. These are two of my sheroes. I just met Michelle, but I'm quickly learning to appreciate what she does. Jerry and I go back quite a few years, as well as my relationship with Linda. Jerry's actually the godmother of my three children. We've been connected for the past 35 years. Sometimes she beats me up a lot, but I have to deal with it. Anyway, what I'll share will be mostly personal issues. And I want to start off some of the things that Jerry said I want to respond to or add to it. But I'm 64 years old, and I want this to sink in to the students and the young people that's listening. I'm 64 years old. I've been traumatized by what these issues that we're talking about for 59 years. So please let that sink in. This is very emotional for me. I'm gonna try not to allow my emotions to show, but sometimes it's difficult because these are personal experiences. My first experience with dealing with the trauma of the police, and I'm being kind when I use that word because I usually don't refer to them as police, based on my experiences. I was 5 years old, and I witnessed my brother-in-law, who at the time was my older sister's boyfriend, being assaulted by somewhere between 13 and 20 police for nothing that he did. I don't know if it was a result of him being under the influence of alcohol or drugs or whatever it was. It appeared to be something new to him. And I didn't understand at the time that instead of the police responding to that, there should have been some type of mental health person that was on site to address it, whatever the issue was. But I witnessed them beat him down mercilessly. That was my first experience. My second experience was at the age of 13. My siblings and I and a few other people were coming from my parents owned a cafe, and we were coming from the cafe. We had just closed the cafe, and we lived a couple of blocks from there. So we were all walking home, and right in front of our house, the police had pulled someone over. So my cousin, we stopped to observe what was going on. We were right in front of our house, and they began to tell us to get out of there, leave. And all we was doing just watching what they were doing. So my cousin turned his back to the police, and he told all of us to get in the yard. As long as we stand in our yard, we had the right to monitor what was going on. And while he had his back turned toward him, they grabbed him and threw him on the car and began to assault him. I instinctively responded and grabbed one of them to stop them from assaulting him. It got kind of out of hand. They called back up. Sergeant came. By that time, my mother had made it home, and she was the one that pretty much resolved the issue. We didn't go to jail or anything. That was my second experience. Between the age of 13 and the age of 62, I've had several confrontations, physical confrontations, a lot of things. I won't go into all that. But at the age of 62, I was working on my car, and my alarm had went off, turned the alarm off, and was walking back across the street to my house. And there was a white guy standing out there with his dog. And I saw a car turn the corner, and they parked down the street. So I'm not thinking of anything. And I'm almost at the house, realized I left a towel sitting on the car. I walked back across the street to get the towel and found out that the car that hit the corner was actually police. which led to a physical confrontation, not a physical confrontation, but a confrontation where he pulled his weapon on me, he threatened me. I'm asking him what is this all about, what's going on. Before it was over with, I was handcuffed. He never did tell me why he approached me. Some other car, his backup came, and the backup, one of the officers said, we got a call that someone suspicious was standing by a truck. So at this point in my life, I don't address police violence very, very easily. So I'm always standing up for what I feel is my rights. And what they meant was that there's a Black man that looks suspicious, and there was nothing suspicious going on. Excuse me. So anyway, that's some of my personal experiences with dealing with the police. As Jerry mentioned, the police murdered my brother. In fact, that's how she and I met, when she was part of Equal Rights Congress, dealing with police abuse, immigration rights, and so forth. And her organization got involved with the murder of my brother. And my brother, at the time that this happened, he was a bus driver for which was RTD back in the day. And he also had a jewelry store. And he had called me one evening, and we were kind of happy because I just got hired to work for the bus company. So we were looking forward to eventually, once I get through my training, getting transferred to the division that he worked at, so we get a chance to see each other more. So he had called me, and he was kind of excited or agitated because of stuff that was going on by his house. So even though I had to be in Orange County at 6 that morning to start my training, I decided, I was in the middle of working on the car, I decided to go down there and see what was going on. Fast forward, he was talking to some youngsters. The police was looking for someone. They had the streets cordoned off. He's talking to these youngsters about the police holding our community under siege, how we need to be more involved with that. And I left him a few hours later, only to find out the next day that he had been murdered. Accused of no crime. In fact, they settled. Eventually, it was a lawsuit filed, and they settled for a monetary amount, which didn't bring him back. So there are a lot of personal experience that shows that your safety is not guaranteed by law enforcement. I mean, we have a over 500-year history in this country of violence, intimidation, murder, everything. I mean, this country was founded on almost eliminating the indigenous population. It was founded on kidnapping of people, African people, and bringing them over here. So if conditions haven't changed in 500 years, how do we expect to be any different in the next 500 years under the same regime, under the same type of structure? What Jerry talked about in terms of reimagining. I mean, we've been Malcolm X uses this phrase, we've been bamboozled. You know, we've been hoodwinked because we bought into the lie. We think that if we had police that were more sensitive, that condition would change. We think that the Democrats are better than Republicans, or in some cases, Republicans are better than Democrats. We live under a two-party system our entire lives, our entire generation for the past 500 years. And under either one of those, conditions haven't improved for the people. It's always been the few above the many. So in order for that to change, it's not about defunding the police. It's not about changing some laws. That might bring some relief, but that's not going to change the conditions. That's not going to change the underlying condition of what we exist with. I have a couple of videos that I'd like to share, which kind of segues into some of the stuff that's happened over the years, where people have tried to empower themselves to make the difference, because it's not going to happen under police, under the prison population. Look at what ICE has done to families. They have devastated, destroyed families. You got innocent babies losing their lives. Mothers been separated from their children. Children been lost to the system. But we think that they're the ones that are the responsible ones. They're the ones that's gonna make the difference. So if I can, I'd like to share these couple of videos and close out my presentation. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. This first video I'll share addresses the issue that occurred while I was in prison in 1991, where a family who had just migrated from Mexico, their house was firebombed, and it was stated in the media that some blacks had set a fire. The end result was that 3 babies and 2 women lost their lives. And nobody did anything for the family. The other thing that it showed, or that the media talked about at that time, was briefly, I only saw it once, I didn't see it again. And I'm in prison watching this. There was a black man who went in the house to try to help save the family. And the grandfather, thinking he was one of the assailants, shot him. Fortunately, he survived the gunshot wound. And with the assistance of Jerry, was able to get in contact with, what I did first was I talked to a lot of the Chicano brothers on the yard, and a lot of the blacks or the Africans, and talk about the need for us to send a statement out there, and that we should be united around this effort and not allow the media to sensationalize it where it pits brothers against brothers, black and brown, which is usually what happens inside prison. When something happens on the street, it reverberates in a negative way inside. So we were able to raise over $2,000 to donate to the family and donate to the man who tried to help the family. And this is the grandfather, and the man, Gregory Moore, meeting for the first time since that incident. The second video will be an effort I was involved with for a number of years, where people came together all around the country to address this issue of violence in our community among us, the gang violence and so forth. And so this was the first meeting that we held in 1993, April 1993, in Kansas City. The brother who will start this off, he and I have been connected ever since that meeting back in April of 1993.
Yeah, we're not getting the video or the audio right now. Have you started yet?
Okay. Yeah, let me stop and go back to make sure I have the controls. Let me know if you see it. Is it showing?
Sympathy for a Latino family.
Yes.
Last month's arson fire in Jordan Downs. The inmates also have a message of hope for Black and Latino youngsters.
Representative of Black and Hispanic prisoner organizations, moved by last month's tragic fire at the Jordan Downs housing project, the fire that took the lives of 5 members of one Hispanic family, and a fire possibly set by a group of blacks, an act that increased tensions between the races in the project. But the tragedy had just the opposite effect inside the prison, where black and Hispanics raised over $2,000 and today presented checks to survivors of the Zuniga family to help with burial expenses, and a check to Gregory Moore, who acted heroically during the incident. Leaders of the inmate organizations called on blacks and Hispanics to work together to solve problems.
With all the violence that we have going on in our communities, someone needs to come forward and say something to oppose what's happening, you know, and try to change the direction of what's going on.
So a lot of the brothers here, it looks like they've come together more as one, and they're willing to help each other by any needs that we're all able to do here in the institution.
The men wanted to offer a positive message from behind the walls of the prison, especially to young people in the city. And they admitted working together was a good experience inside.
Come together, one, not black and white, Mexican, but all one, helping together. We thank you for the unity.
Bob Banfield, Channel 7 Eyewitness News, at the California Men's Prison in Chino.
I've seen our mothers
Is the
cry.
second one showing?
We're tired of going to the graves. We're tired of going to the penitentiary. We're tired of receiving our mothers, our wives,
Is the second video showing?
Yes, everything's
Yes.
showing.
Okay. This is Nane Alejandro with Bottles and Needles in Santa Cruz.
daughters coming to visit him and guards touching them on open.
We got blood, we got quick, we got the sirens, we got vices, we got souls all coming together with you, living community people, working in the community, sitting down at the table together saying, listen, we can make a difference. It's time for us to put them guns and pistols away and start loving each other and doing those things in those communities that I remember.
The man that says that I'm the problem, grandfather. The man that says that we are the problem. No, grandfather, we are part of the solution. And that's why we came here, grandfather.
This effort is far bigger than any one of us. This effort is about all of us. The sons and daughters of this country are our sons and our daughters. If we don't put forth an effort to try to make sure that there's a future for them, nobody's going to do it. The message that we're trying to send out there, we can do this together. We can do this together. There's no big me's and little you's in this.
That's right.
We're all in this here.
Yeah. Right.
There's a consciousness we're trying to raise. There's a consciousness we're trying to send across this country. We're going to send forth the message when we leave here. It's going to go all across this country. We're tired. We ain't going to take it no more because we're going to start trying to do something. We're going to start trying to work within our communities and try to promote peace. We're going to try to tell our brothers it ain't about killing each other.
That's right.
It's about us trying to do something for each other. I know that we have been manipulated and indoctrinated to hate each other. We have been placed in situations to kill each other.
That's right.
That manipulation, that indoctrination, with you people here, you're going to change that because you're going to bring about a new consciousness. You're going to bring about the truth. And in that truth, we're going to say freedom. We're going to set each other free. We're going to work towards some economic development here before we leave from here. Remember, you are the ones who can make the difference. Each and every one of you. It ain't us.
That's right.
It ain't no big me, little you. It's all of us together. Yes,
breakdown, basically, we formed the Peace Treaty in Los Angeles. The three major projects, the Crips, the Bloods, and so on. But we forgot one thing, to thank one person, Mujahid, his father. This father walked through every project while we was out there shooting guys, playing with our pistols, talking our mouths. This brother, Mujahid Abdullah Kareem, came to us. No matter how much we cussed at him, he stood there and put his word in. And this established the Peace Treaty in Los Angeles today. You know, he came to us and explained us the real on how it would be if it was peace in this world. And you know, we just want this to work because we don't want our babies growing up to fill up them penitentiaries that they building. And we you know, it's time to look forward. Stop looking back on the history of the death of them people who done died over the mistreatment of our mind. It's time for us to look forward. So we came here to put this thing in effect because we know if it can work in LA, it can be pushed throughout the world. And with all these brothers here, we willing to work with them, not on the basis because we're trapped, but on the basis that we're trying to be free.
All right. Yes.
Yeah, for those that don't know me, my name is Gus Frias. I bring greetings from the East LA barrios. We brought together a lot of homeboys from some of the major gangs in LA that are still at war with each other. But I'll tell you again, if you know the history of LA's gangs, we are very deeply rooted. And all I can tell you is that today we brought representatives from 18th Street, some of the Maravillas, the Garrity Hills. We got a lot of other individuals from some of the other barrios. And I want to tell you one thing. In terms of leadership, leadership is a very powerful word that oftentimes we don't understand what it means. But I'll tell you, it is very simple. It is rooted in some very solid principles and values. One of the first values is the value of respect. Everything that we do has to begin with a self-respect and respect for others. Trust. The trust from within and the trust for others. Responsibility. The courage. Each of us is a piece of the major puzzle, and that's the only way we will achieve success in the United States of America. I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
I have one other one that's a few seconds long that included one of the women talking, and then I'll cut it from there.
Unless it's been.
Please, brothers, I'm saying it's not just about when we mention the gang, we mention the dying, and we mention the jails, we mention the brothers. It's not about mentioning the struggle and mentioning the brothers. We made that mistake before. If we're talking about not dividing ourselves, it's brothers and sisters. Peace.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, G2. I know you will be leaving shortly. Just before you leave, if you can, drop any contact information you may have or ways for people to get involved. Also, if you would like that in the chat section for our viewers. But we thank you so much for that. It's back to you, Jerry.
Good luck with the rest of the presentation. Linda and Michelle here, I won't be able to be on with y'all, but I know you're going to do a great job.
Man, we truly appreciate you.
All right.
Let's hope you feel better.
Yeah.
Linda, you're up, Linda.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you in this discussion, this forum that you all have created around race and policing. It's pretty hard to come after G2 because the things that he represented and talked about are continuing to this day, and the attacks on Black people and people of color, and of course the unity that he described inside the prison system is also continuing. And that's something I think is just really important for us to emphasize in our whole presentation. So I want to start out by saying that Walter Wallace Jr. was killed by the police last night in Philadelphia. We all know that. And it is yet one more example of the plague of police brutality and police murder that is gripping our nation, that we have all protested about and fought against, probably many of us, for years and years and years. The plague of police brutality and police killings is so rampant that I want to share with you that they killed my niece, a young woman, got in trouble, in juvenile hall and various things, had problems with drugs, and was hooked up with a drug dealer in San Diego. They brought 7 police forces to her baby daddy's house, and he had his only crime supposedly was not reporting that he had moved to his probation officer. And for this, they chased him. He was in an SUV and they chased him. She got in the car, was with him, and he ran into a telephone pole and they killed her because they were shooting at his car for the crime of not reporting that he had moved. So her 3 children at age 21, she was killed, and now they were motherless. The father was locked up. And, this is my family, a white family, a middle-class family. So we know that it has spread to such a poisonous extent in our country that we must eradicate it now. I feel so urgent about this, witnessing it in my own community here in Santa Rosa, and outraged at the continuation of these killings. So that's what I feel like the context is here. And I really appreciate the fact that you all are so serious about discussing these issues and hopefully figuring out actions that we can take together, which number 1 starts next Tuesday. We all got to vote. So Jerry asked me to talk a little bit about my own history, which I don't really like to do that much. I think I would like to put it in the context, put my little brief life history in the context of collective action and the power that we all have to take collective action with others and change things. And I discovered that power, that feeling of we really can make things better when I left Iowa, where I grew up, and went to college at Michigan State University, and very quickly became, for the first time, connected to people from other races, people from other cultures, and from even internationally from other countries. And my eyes opened so wide from the very beginning, but I remember specifically going to Detroit and going on a field trip, an economics field trip, and realizing that this was a different world from the world that I grew up in Iowa, and that I had really better get on my feet and start learning about the real world, the whole world, not just where I came from. And I started to do that, and as soon as I did, I recognized that we, the United States of America, was an imperial power, and that we were bent on controlling and dominating the world economically and politically and culturally, for that matter. Even in terms of language, we wanted everybody to speak English. And that the root of that is white supremacy. And that the strong attachment of this country to that white supremacist history was something that we had to wipe out. And I became determined to fight for equality. And it was after the civil rights movement. I graduated from high school in 1965 and was more involved in the anti-war movement. And the Michigan State was actually the center of training secret police for the South Vietnamese regime. And we tried to expose it. We fought ROTC. I dropped out very quickly and became a full-time activist. And in 1969, as a representative of Students for Democratic Society, I went to Vietnam on a peace delegation. And we received 3 prisoners of war who had been captured by the North Vietnamese, shot down, and one guy was actually rescued from a Navy ship and then put him in North Vietnamese prison camps. And they were released by the North Vietnamese to the American people. And we were representatives of the peace movement that were receiving them as a gesture of friendship from the Vietnamese people to the people of the United States, of peace and friendship. And for me, again, that was a tremendously inspiring and moving experience. I was there about 3 weeks. We traveled from Hanoi all the way to the border of Vietnam, of South Vietnam, which was still being bombed by the United States. So I witnessed the destruction that a genocidal war can wreak against a country. I saw temples that were thousands and thousands of years old destroyed by carpet bombing from the air. I saw whole areas whole cities where the only thing standing was a pillar with a red cross, which had been a hospital. And I saw schools that were built underground so that the kids could still continue to learn, even during carpet bombings. The Vietnamese people impressed me and inspired me so much. And I realized that our movement needed to become more committed and more militant if we were going to do anything about stopping the war in Vietnam and stopping US imperialism from spreading all over the world. So I came back and I continued to organize and became part of SDS Weatherman, which was a militant organization, a militant part of Students for a Democratic Society that believed strongly in solidarity and following the leadership of people of color, in particular the Black Panthers as an organization and the Young Lords as a Puerto Rican revolutionary organization. And AIM as it became more of a movement and more of a movement force, the American Indian movement. So we, SDS, developed, I guess in 1971, I got arrested again. I was part of an effort to develop a clandestine movement at that point, and was accused of conspiracy to cross state lines to organize demonstrations, which I had done. And I did 6 months in Cook County Jail at that time and came out, and I moved to Texas and started organizing there, primarily in solidarity with the Chicano community, and then a lot in solidarity with the Black community there in the John Brown Anti-Klan Committee. And we had direct interface with the Klan on many occasions. There were death threats to our members of our organization. They sent us a postcard to our post box that was a picture of a coffin with John Brown Anti-Klan Committee in the coffin. And some of our members wore bulletproof vests. They had their houses attacked, their cars attacked. And we did build a really strong movement against the Klan in Austin, Texas, and throughout Texas, actually. And at the same time, we were exposing the deep connections between the Klan and the police. And that was the basis, really, of the formation of the John Brown Anti-Klan Committee, was exposing those connections in a prison system in Napanoch, New York. And then every place that the John Brown Anti-Klan Committee had a chapter, we started exposing and recognizing and fighting against those connections between the Klan, the right wing, the white supremacists, and the police force that is policing the Black and Brown community. So I guess my roots in wanting to defund the police and wanting community control of the police and wanting to abolish the police are very, very deep. In 1982, I went underground and started again trying to develop a revolutionary clandestine movement that could challenge. It sounds kind of funny, to say it now. We had big dreams. We wanted to challenge the power of the US government and change the world, of course. Needless to say, we did not succeed. We struggled to build some kind of revolutionary solidarity, again, with Black and Puerto Rican revolutionary organizations like the Black Liberation Army and the Puerto Rican Independence Movement. I was convicted of a conspiracy to participate, I'll read what it says, to influence, change, and protest policies and practices of the US government concerning various international and domestic matters through the use of violent and illegal means. And so basically we were convicted of this conspiracy to do symbolic bombings of the South African consulate, the Police Benevolent Association, military targets. Nobody was killed. The property damage was pretty limited. We were trying to make a statement that our movement needed to really challenge what the United States is doing and build our capacity to take it on. Now, I recognize from we were arrested in 1985 on my birthday. And ultimately, I had 5 trials, and I was sentenced to a total of 40 years in prison. And I think that, Jerry said something about sacrifice in the beginning of her introduction, and I don't agree with that, Jerry. I feel that we all live our lives, and we have experiences, we make decisions. And I'm proud of the decisions I made, even though I had the consequences that I did. And I'm actually grateful, truly grateful for those years and the people that I met, what I learned in prison, and how it changed me, how it continued the changes in my life. And I think one of the things that is so important that I'd like to urge you, number one, everybody to read a little essay that my partner and I wrote called The Prison Industrial Complex and the Global Economy. I can put it in the chat later. It does try to build some kind of understanding that our economy is based in this system of racism, in the system of policing, surveillance, monopoly capitalism. And who the police serve is intimately connected with our economic system. So I think that Jerry's completely right. Everybody, I agree with the premise of these discussions, which is that we need to destructure the police, we need to destructure ICE, we need to destructure surveillance in our society. I think probably this is way past time. So maybe I'll stop. I will just say that after I got out of prison, I have been part of some very, very successful organizing with Ban the Box, which eliminated the question about conviction history from public employment and private employment in California and 36 other states, 150 big cities, and formerly incarcerated people did that. So I hope everybody on the call really recognizes your own power to come together with other people and make changes that we need to make. Even though they want us to feel powerless, we are not. And I was part of building an organization that reflects that, called All of Us or None. And currently I'm working with Jerry and a lot of other people to eliminate life without parole sentencing in California, which is a travesty and of course a tragedy. The women inside, I also work with California Coalition for Women Prisoners. The women inside call it the living death penalty, death by incarceration. So I hope that those of you on this call, I hope we have a great discussion, and I hope that you will mobilize yourselves. We need you. Thank you so much.
Okay, that brings us to Michelle Bernardino, who I've asked to speak a bit about herself, introduce who she is as part of her presentation. I did a little bit of that when I introduced you in the beginning, but I think you're far better prepared to give us a history of who you are. Okay, go.
Thank you so much. I just want to take a moment to, again, express my deep thanks and gratitude to Jerry, to Linda, to G2 for being on this panel, for allowing me to share space, thoughts, and struggles with you, and to all the organizers at Cal State San Bernardino as well for providing this platform and engaging in critical conversations that are very much needed, especially during these times. I also want to take a moment to uplift the names of Walter Wallace Jr., Richard Brooks, Roxanne Moore, Danielle Prude, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tatiana Jefferson, Aura Rosar, and many others who were murdered by police. I also want to uplift the names of Romien Jali, Cipriano Chavez Alvarez, Fernando Sabanjo Garcia, Jacqueline Calmaquin, Felipe Alonso Gomez, Claudia Patricia Gomez Gonzalez, who were murdered by ICE. As mentioned by Jerry, my name is Michelle. I am the offspring of Martin, a Paisha Mexican father from San Andres Ixtlan, Jalisco, Mexico, and Mirta, mother from Concepcion, Intibuca, Honduras, Lenca lands. I am tuning in from Tongva Cahuilla lands. My work, my political home, what I consider my political home, is in reproductive justice. And I'll get a little bit more into defining that for the sake of the other points that I'll be discussing, and also tying in with some of the points that G2 and Linda have made throughout their parts of this presentation and panel. I came to the work of reproductive justice back in 2013, maybe a little bit actually before that, 2012 may have been it, and just really questioning sort of, I think the lack of education, it came from not having the education or the access to a comprehensive sex education. And from there, that really branched off into reproductive justice. And that really being what grounds me, I think, in moving forward in many political spaces, political and personal, I would say. And so I will be sharing with you a few points about prisons and ICE and jail at the intersection of reproductive justice, reproductive oppression, and bodily autonomy. I want to also take a moment to acknowledge the anger, I think, that has been present in this panel, and it's righteous anger. I don't want to dismiss it. I don't want to tone police it in any way. I will also come in with a lot of anger, and I think anger is necessary because of the situations that we live in, because of the conditions, right, that are present currently in our society, that we need to acknowledge that we are not living, that we are surviving, and that we deserve better. We are worthy of much better. So with that said, I'll go ahead. I don't know if, Jerry, you received the presentation or if you are able to broadcast it on your end.
Are you talking about share something that you have?
Yeah, the presentation, I shared it with you. If you would be able to screen share it. I wasn't able to make it on my computer on time, so I'm on my phone. But if you're able to screen share and then just click present, and it should come right back on. And if not, I can just go ahead and talk through the points.
Okay, I'd have to find it. You emailed it to me.
Yes.
Okay, well, why don't you go, speak, and then I'll look for it.
That's fine. Okay. So when I was invited onto this panel, I wasn't sure what to expect. And I think I also want to take a moment to acknowledge how humbling this experience is to be alongside G2 and Linda, who are amazing, incredible organizers both on the inside and the outside, and for someone as myself to be on here. So thank you so much again. The title of the panel allowed me to pause for a second. And as Jerry so eloquently opened it up with why prisons, police, and ICE contradict public safety. And I think the next question for me was, well, what is not public safety? And so I ask anyone that is tuning in to really sit with this question and think through what is not public safety. And I think Jerry did a phenomenal job in breaking down how police, ICE, and jails are not. I also want to share a quote. I will be actually quoting a lot of persons that are on Twitter and Instagram who just provide amazing analysis on the prison industrial complex and policing. And so this is by Che Gosset via Twitter, and their handle is @AutoTheoryQueen. They published this tweet on June 3rd, just this past summer. And this is to follow up that question about safety. The question, how will we be safe without police, operates under the assumption that they are providing safety instead of the largest source of harm, and is based in a non-Black horizon of thought and subjectivity, where you can think that cops are your caretakers. And when reading this, it's really important, I think, to understand that there's a contradiction in all of that, right? That they have never provided any safety, any form of public safety. And it's very important to make clear that cops are not caretakers, that prisons are not caretakers, and that ICE is not a caretaker. And they never will be. And for this reason, we need to ensure that they are abolished. A system that is built with the intention to isolate you and dehumanize you cannot be reformed. So we are not asking, right, to reform a system that is inherently violent and constantly trying to eradicate our communities. And therefore, abolition is our obligation. And these are in the words of Dylan Rodriguez, who is a professor at UCR, I believe in ethnic studies. And I think that goes to the point that Linda had just made, right, in not really seeing, right, her time on the inside as a sacrifice, but as experiences, right, but also understanding a greater, the sort of just a greater cause, I think, that is at stake, that this is our obligation, that we are here now, right, and if we are going to be talking about abolition, then we need to be talking about how we're going to take care of one another, that we have an obligation to one another. So a little bit about reproductive justice, and just opening up with what I had mentioned previously and how that I consider my political home. Reproductive justice is a human right to maintain persons, the personal bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities. Sister Song, Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective. Sorry, give me 1 second. Sorry, 1 minute.
And are we all caught up in the share screen, guys?
Yeah,
Yes.
the slides up. Let me know which slide you want to transition to.
Okay, thank you. It would be slide 6, actually. Thank you so much. Thank you. So on there, you'll see the definitions of reproductive justice. And this is pulling from Sister Song, Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective. And they are an organization that's based in the South that have done important work throughout centering reproductive justice, bodily autonomy, access to safe, legal, and low-cost abortions. And I have been informed a lot by their work throughout this time. And I share this definition with you because when I think about prisons and ICE and jails, I automatically think that reproductive justice can never be present. If in the definition we have the right to live in a safe and sustainable community, to raise our children or family or kinship, whoever that may be, by default, this cannot be. Bodily autonomy is a simple but radical concept that individuals have the right to control what does and does not happen to our bodies. When we have full bodily autonomy, not only are we empowered to make decisions about our health and future without coercion and controlled by others, we also have the support and resources needed to meaningfully carry out these decisions. And this goes also in conjunction with what Jerry had mentioned earlier in the reimagining, in the re-envisioning of what we want for ourselves, what we deserve, what we know we deserve, what our communities deserve. And to me, this is all rooted in reproductive justice and bodily autonomy. In the points that G2 made about the history of this country, this nation state, right, this US imperial power that is completely built on indigenous genocide, on enslavement, that we need to understand that bodily autonomy, that reproductive justice, that all of this is very much linked to indigenous sovereignty and Black liberation. We cannot have any without the others, that our liberation is a collective one. We could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Reproductive oppression, and this is really important, especially when we begin to discuss further forced sterilizations and institutional violence. Reproductive justice and reproductive oppression is a controlling and exploitation of women, girls, and individuals through our bodies, sexuality, labor, and reproduction, both biological and social, by families, communities, and institutions and society. Reproductive oppression cannot be separated out from the other oppressions individuals and communities experience, just as a person's reproductive health experience cannot be separated from mental, social, economic, familial, communal, or environmental well-being. And I would also add spiritual well-being. This is important, again, because if we are placing persons, right, imprisoning persons, incarcerating persons, detaining persons in places that systematically are dehumanizing and not meeting the basic needs of a person, then by default, there's reproductive oppression present. And this is also going to the point that G2 had made in regards to family separation that's taking place. Family separation begins at the point that, and this is for me, speaking in particular to the history of my family, my mother being someone who left Honduras, she came here in the early 80s. And so that was at the peak of the civil wars in Central America. And so what does it mean to leave a place that you can no longer call home, right? That is no longer a safe and sustainable community, that to be in a place where you have been displaced, to come here, and then only to experience that violence over and over and over again. We have families that are coming in continuously, and they have not stopped, from Central America, from Haiti, from the other parts of the Caribbean, from South America, from Mexico, many indigenous communities as well, that are being separated at the border. The names that I mentioned initially to uplift of the persons that were murdered by ICE, the majority of them were indigenous communities, community members from Guatemala. And so family separation is happening in many ways that maybe we had not been used to seeing prior, but we need to remember that the history of this country has always been about separating families, about disrupting our kinship and our relations in our community. That this has a long history and it has not ended. And that for those things to end, that we need to believe in abolition. We need to envision abolitionist futures. In the following slide, I will be discussing forced sterilizations, institutional violence, and reproductive oppression as a content warning for you all. Things to note are that forced sterilizations in prisons have taken place throughout many years. From 1909 to 1979, about 20,000 persons were sterilized. From 2006 to 2010, about 150. And CCWP, which I believe Linda dropped one of their links in the chat, has done a lot of phenomenal work, especially in the petition that they currently have circulating for bringing reparations for persons that were forcibly sterilized, right? And this is a really crucial point because forced sterilizations are an absolute attack on someone's body, and it's depriving someone of their bodily autonomy. And this is what I mean when reproductive oppression is the only thing that is present in these spaces, in these violent institutions, that there is no bodily autonomy, there's no reproductive justice present when they're forcibly sterilizing persons, when they're separating from their families, when they are detaining them, when they are putting them in prisons, and just in those ways rupturing those kinship and communities. And most recently, right, and this just came out about a month ago, I believe, the forced sterilizations taking place in ICE, where in Irwin County Detention Center in Osceola, Georgia, nurse Dar Utin, who was a whistleblower in this case, reported that there was a lot of hysterectomies taking place unwanted and with no consent. If there's no consent and it's unwanted, that is a form of reproductive oppression. And furthermore, to also acknowledge that these forced sterilizations that are taking place are a form of genocide, right? That when we often think about forced sterilization or eugenics, we often think that it's something not here, but there's a very particular history of eugenics here in the States that informed the eugenics and quote unquote ethnic cleansing, but I don't like using that term as genocide, right? In Germany and so forth. And so it's important to understand that this is a long and ongoing history and violence and attack on people's bodies that is taking place. That family separation comes almost immediately, and it's intricately tied with US imperialism. That the US continues to meddle in Central America, and this is why we see communities still fleeing their areas. That we also see foreign companies from Taiwan, from Canada, from the US coming into Central America and placing in developing the palm oil industry, and how this displaces indigenous communities as well. We have seen a rise of indigenous, of Mayan, Quiche, Cachiquel, Ixchil, Mam communities come into the US and be separated at the border, be murdered at the hands of ICE, And the other thing that often is not spoken about is that these forced migrations require much more planning and preparation for families that are forced to make these decisions to leave their homes. And one of them is that a lot of the young women and girls and mothers actually take birth control prior to leaving their countries. And they do this intentionally because they know of the violence that they may very well experience throughout their migration, their forced migration and displacement across several countries. That there's gender violence present in this, that this is coming at the hands of US imperialism and a lot of other foreign powers. For the next slide, and moving into ICE a little bit more, I want us to just sit with the date on the top of the screen that says March 1st, 2003. This is when ICE was created in 2003. It wasn't that long ago. It hasn't been around that long. And so for us to imagine a future without ICE is possible because it hasn't always existed. There's been other forms of violence, of course, of other entities and institutions that have inflicted violence in our communities. But in particular, ICE and in the heinous ways that it functions, it's important to note that it hasn't always been around, that it is something that is, 17 years old, I believe, if I'm doing the math correct. And what I'm going to read next is actually directly from their website. It says, ICE was granted a unique combination of civil and criminal authorities to better protect national security and strengthen public safety in response to the deadly attacks perpetrated on 9/11. Leveraging those authorities, ICE has become a powerful and sophisticated federal law enforcement agency. And it's really important to note the language that they use here, right? And I underlined it on there: better protect national security and strengthen public safety. And with that, I asked for who? In response to deadly attacks perpetrated on 9/11, an institution, a whole system built on xenophobia. And then leveraging those authorities, ICE has become a powerful and sophisticated federal law, the audacity, right, to claim in the ways and to acknowledge the amount of power that they have within the structure that they've created. There has been continuous transfers taking place between jail, ICE, and prisons that have contributed to the COVID outbreaks that have taken place. That, you know, throughout the summer, we have been organizing caravans to bring awareness and raise awareness that we need to get our community out of there, that these are not safe spaces, that these are actually hotspots. Mm-hmm. We have here in Southern California, Adelanto detention camp, not too far from where I live, Otay Mesa detention camp, a camp, and I refer to them intentionally as camps because a center, I think I associate it more with like community centers, and that sounds very much more nurturing than what they actually ever could be. They're camps. They detain people, they hurt people, people get sick there, people die there. And then in conjunction with that, we also had the prison boom that took place, right? And I would highly recommend looking into Ruth Wilson Gilmore's work, Golden Gulag, where she explains sort of the geographies of this and the economics of this as well, right? We need to understand that these institutions profit off of the detainment and imprisonment of people and how horrible that is. And for this reason, abolition needs to happen. It needs to happen, and there shouldn't be any question about it. Surveillance, for the next slide. Surveillance is policing and thus a conscious disregard of bodily autonomy. So I think briefly, just touching on the extensions of how these systems work, surveillance is so rampant in our communities, like in just any space, right? From our phones to our computers to cameras being at almost every intersection. And in thinking about that being an extension, right, of in the ways that the system finds way to incriminate us, right, for any little thing. That we have no control over the ways that we move in this world, that ultimately, right, we should have this sovereignty, this autonomy over ourselves and what we do, but we are constantly watched. We are expected to act a certain way, as if anger were not a right response to what's going on. And to this, I also would like to expand on the point that Dylan Rodriguez had mentioned in one of his talks about police accountability, you know, where people look for what does accountability look like, and really the part to that I think sat really heavy with me is really casualty control, right? That police are not able to, they're a whole entity that should not exist. And more than anything is casualty control. But if that is what is there, then for that very reason, they should be abolished. They're agents of the state with a lot of power, with military gear, who don't ever really think twice, right, of what they're doing. For the next slide on abolition, and this is from Ruth Wilson Gilmore's interview that she had with in the New York Times. It appeared last year in April, titled "Is Prison Necessary?" And she states, abolition means not just the closing of prisons, but the presence instead of vital systems of support that many communities lack. Instead of asking how in a future without prisons we will deal with so-called violent people, abolitionists ask how we resolve inequalities and get people the resources they need long before the hypothetical moment when, as Gilmore puts it, they mess up. And these are really important words because we are seeing this happen in real time with COVID taking place, in people mobilizing with mutual aid efforts. And I want to take a moment here to also expand a bit on what Jerry had shared as well, a little bit about myself and the work that myself and a few of my comrades do. And that is that we provide mutual aid efforts to forcibly displace Central American folks and Haitian folks, Cameroonian folks in Tijuana. And this has been taking place since April of 2018. We haven't stopped. And when I think of abolition, I think of the ways in which we are implementing our own systems to take care of one another, right? To ensure that we're meeting the basic needs of one another. And so from making trips down to Tijuana, to Kumeyaay lands, anywhere at times, I typically actually travel a little bit more than 3 times a year. If anything, it might be at times twice a month. With COVID, that has been a little bit of a setback, but we go as often as we can. And we need to understand that mutual aid is something that is built on reciprocity, that it is sustainable, that it is ongoing, that this has been ongoing, at least for us and for our collective since 2018, that we are constantly checking in to see what are the needs of folks there, that we're in conversation with them, that it is not just of like, oh my God, I feel so sorry, like working out of this white savior complex, not at all, to understanding the very real political and economic and social like aspects of the situation as to why our communities are being displaced, as to why they are not allowed to seek asylum currently, why they're constantly having on a daily to fight even xenophobia present in Mexico. And so for abolition, I also want to share a few quotes for the following slide on some of my favorite quotes that I think help me to ground myself again in this work. That abolition is building the future from the present in all ways we can. and this is by Ruth Wilson Gilmore, that abolition means the end of policing and prisons, saying no to brutality and totality of policing itself. And that's by Che Gosset. When we say abolish the police, we also mean the cop in your head and in your heart, Termelin. And we need to understand that that it's important to also look up on our elders, on people who have been in these struggles long before us, that they have the knowledge and the resources, that they are I'm grateful for those that are still here with us to inform us and to guide us in these struggles, that abolition is not something that was created this past summer, that abolition is something that has been ongoing for many decades. And with that, I also want to share something that is required for myself, that Mariam Kaba, who I also recommend looking into her work, that hope is a discipline. And this is really important because often we are, I think, defeated. We feel defeated being in this society in the way that it functions, that we need to believe every day, especially in a world that is constantly trying to kill us. And so with that, and for the just last few slides, what is public safety? I ask all of you this to think about it. I started with what is not public safety. And now I'm asking, what is public safety? To think of the ways in which I have shared that we have, I believe, is public safety, in the ways that are collective, and I check in with folks in Tijuana, in the ways that we are providing mutual aid for them, in the ways that these relationships that we have built there have also allowed me to build other relationships. And I will share a little bit more about that with the most recent mutual aid effort that we have going. One of my good friends who came with the LGBT caravana from Honduras, who supported even continuing efforts in Tijuana, and then to the very point where he turned himself in and then was in detention to the point where he was released and granted asylum. He, this past summer, contacted me and told me, you know, I have compañeras in Honduras, they're trans women. They have been deeply affected by COVID, and I'm not sure how we can help them. And I wanted to check in with you to see if there was anything that we could do. And so we set up a call. I met Valerie, one of the trans women who is from Nicaragua and migrated into Honduras. And we discussed, you know, what are your needs and how is it that we can help, right? Because we're also talking about being a few countries away from one another. And she shared, you know, what they were experiencing, what they needed support with. And we decided collectively that we were going to start a GoFundMe. And then eventually we set up a Venmo account that provides support, financial support for more than 12 trans women in Honduras. And it's brown, black, Garifuna trans women who have been deeply affected by COVID. And so I think of public safety, of the ways in which we're also building relationships, that this would not have been possible if I had not met my friend in Tijuana who came with the LGBT caravana, but at the same time, understanding the very real violences that they have endured, that they have experienced in their home country of Honduras, as Honduras is a narco dictadura, it is a narco gobierno, it is common knowledge that it is working hand in hand with the US, and how it has absolutely made the conditions pretty much unlivable. Like people are not able to live in a safe and sustainable environment there, and they are fleeing. So with the last few questions that I have in the last slide, I believe it's the last slide. Yeah, I want you all to think of, what does community look like to you? And what does community feel like to you? And what does it sound like? What does safety feel and look like to you? And who is your community? Who are your elders? Who are the youth you are working with? Who are you listening to? Who are you in conversation with? And these are really important questions, especially when thinking about what Jerry shared with these resources, these workshops, these meetings, these webinars taking place, and being in conversation with folks that are creating networks, alternatives to calling the police, right? Because we know that they don't protect us. We protect one another. And so with that, I want to leave you just with the last, last few thoughts into thinking about abolitionist futures. Understand that abolition is a work of care. And one of my favorite words that I just heard this past summer and really they have sunk deep with me is to imagine our grandkids asking what police were and why they existed and being so confused by the answer, I can't wait. And that's also by Tourmaline. And I think that's such a beautiful way to think about the ways in which we're moving forward and trying to remove what is no longer, has never been working for us. And so I'll leave it there to think about the conditions that you, your peers, your family, your friends, the people that you're in community with are creating to meet your community's needs, to be in conversation with one another. Thank you.
We can't thank you all enough for joining us in today's segment, speaking on the issues of public safety and how abolition is the way, more so than defunding or and things of that nature. How speaking on the importance of abolition when we talk about the injustices of today and the biases in the world today, how we need to systematically unlearn and learn all over again what it truly means to serve, protect, and serve, and the true meaning of public safety. So I definitely thank you for opening our eyes to this content, for the ways in which you guys have served and continue to serve in the communities and in this nation as well. I only inspire to be just like you and hopefully leave my mark on this world, to show our youth, to show this country that we have leaders, we have people that genuinely care about the well-being of others, not just our own skin color, but all people. And you guys just, every week I get this ignition of fight in me, and I learn so much from our different guests. And I take these things with me through education, through community, through politics, through work, through in every aspect of my life. I take these tools with me and I apply them, and I can only hope, our kids can grow into that world that we see, that we do live to see it, or at least we could pass that torch to the ones who can do more than what we have so far. So I truly thank you for that. Abolition was the key today.
Yeah.
Yes.
Marlo, may I butt in and ask a question of our panelists, if you don't mind?
Ladies and gentlemen, our very own Mary Texera.
You always say that. Thank you. I just wonder, and I appreciate Michelle so much because she's obviously young and just starting out, but I hear the fire in her voice and in her heart. So I thank you, Michelle, but I am just wondering how Jerry and Linda keep at it after all these years. How do you keep that fire going? And, I can guess what your motivation is, but you all come across as so enthusiastic, and I don't know how you can sustain that for 40, 50 years, So anyone can take it away, unmute yourselves and.
Okay, well, let me start and then pass it to Linda. The work that we do puts us in touch with the victims of this horrifying system, whether they're in prison or on the street, or they're homeless or in communities. And for me, that just angers me so much to see such disparity and such, I mean, we see it under our very nose. We live in two different worlds. And I personally, I couldn't go on unless I tried to do something about it. I could not. So it's just part of me, I think. Linda.
It's a good question, Mary, and one that people ask a lot, but actually I get fed by the work. So I'm not sure, well, when I don't have something to do, when I'm not involved in something, I really get depressed. I feel like I need to contribute to making the world a better place. It's part of what makes me get up in the morning. So I feel very much enriched by the struggle, by the people that I've met, by the campaigns that we've been able to push and win, the changes. We have such huge problems and have not been able to defeat white supremacy, but there are so many people trying to do something about it right now. And I think that for me, it has really brought home to me the need to focus on defeating white supremacy in order to build the possibility for us to have equal, loving relationships with each other, interracial, interclass. It's a crucial piece of it in order to really be able to appreciate each other and work together. And that is the only way we're going to be able to unify enough to address climate change, the existential question of, are the police going to continue being able to kill Black people, brown people? It's unacceptable. We have to change it. We have to do something about it. And if Biden, let's pray he gets elected, but if Biden doesn't, we're going to push his ass. We must make these changes. None of the prison systems have let people out because of COVID. That is unacceptable. So it's not like next Tuesday, if we manage to get rid of that egomaniac narcissist that's running the government, if we get rid of him, we have a lot of work to do. And I believe that we are not going back to the old normal. We have to change. We have to change everything. And to me, that's a huge opportunity. It makes me excited. And I feel like young people are in the vanguard of that. And I'm ready to help.
Those were great answers. Michelle, do you want to add anything onto that? What's your motivation, kid?
It's actually my elders. It's elders and youth. I look onto the younger generations and I'm just like, wow, like they're growing in a time when we're talking about abolition, and how incredible that is, and having elders that have been in the struggle for a long time. I think that's really important, and asking these questions, right? Who is your community? Who are your elders? Who are your youth? We need to ground ourselves in that because this is not going to be an overnight battle. It's gonna be a long one. But it's always, great to hear from folks that have been in this for a very long time, who have put a lot on the line, their very lives on the line. And I'm right there with them.
Fantastic. Well, sorry, go ahead, Linda.
I'd just like to add that I think it's important for us to recognize that abolition as a concept comes from abolishing slavery.
Mhm.
There is no higher human rights value than doing that. And to call it an abolitionist movement recognizes that white supremacy, the white supremacy that was the basis for slavery, is what is the basis for our prison system also.
Absolutely.
And so making that connection, I think, I guess I'm trying to respond to the question in the chat from Jeremy, maybe. I think that's the way to mainstream the idea of abolition, you know, to help people understand when we say abolish the police, we mean a different system. We mean creating collective and cooperative safety. So we have to put, I think the key to mainstreaming it is to make it really specific, give examples, help people fill in the blanks. So it's not just an abstract concept, but it has something real to say about our lives.
Yes, and if I can add one more thing to that, I would say definitely talk to the young ones about it. I have a nephew here at home. I think you saw him in the background. And I continuously talk to him about police and policing. And he's very aware of the work that we do in community. And he asks questions, and he asks really tough questions. And I may not have all the answers, but I think that pushes me to keep going. You know, I may not have the answers. And when people ask, well, you know, if not prisons, then what? It shouldn't be prisons. I may not have like the whole answer, and that's okay. But I know this is not it, right? And again, we deserve better, and we're fighting for better. Good.
Well, you all have taken us down some really, really dark places today, but I think we've come up to see the light, and I see hope and light in your faces. And as you do this work, and I've known Jerry for a very long time, and she is more, maybe even more enthusiastic now than she was in 1999 when I last saw her. So and which is why I asked the question that I did. We didn't have a huge audience today, but you all need to know that we are recording this and we will post it. There will be a lot more people seeing it. You know, people's schedules clash and all of that. And we'll make sure that you get also a copy of this, because I think all of your presentations are really worth passing around and seeing, you know, from Jerry to G2 to Linda to Michelle. I mean, they were powerful, very, very powerful. And we do appreciate you so very much. And I'll be in touch, Jerry. You know I'm going to bother you some more. So
that's great. Can I speak a little bit to Jeremy's, you know, question about mainstreaming? I mean, that's the thing. Proposition J, reimagining LA. I mean, the LA Times supported that. That takes, abolition isn't a single thing. It's not one day and we abolish. It's happening. It's happening incrementally. And in that way, it is becoming mainstream. That Cat 911 that I spoke about, so powerful. A lot of young people involved with enthusiasm because they want to control their own communities and their own lives. So I think it's happening very organically, and you know, it's just exposing more and more people to the question of the like Cat 911 things. And I think there'd be a lot of support. But Reimagine LA is exciting, man. It is so exciting. So yeah, thank you so much, Mary.
Oh, you are so welcome, Jerry, and thank you. We owe you all the thanks, and Linda and Michelle and G2, and we will be in touch because you all, you know, you barely scratch the surface of the work that you're doing right now. So we want you to come back perhaps in a couple of months to expand, excuse me, on what you on your work. Linda, I am fascinated by just the very fact that you went to Vietnam. That wasn't on the same trip as Jane Fonda, was it?
No, I went with Rennie Davis, Dave Dellinger, and a crew from Newsreel and Grace Paley, who, you know, was a big anti-war activist.
Yes, yeah.
And also Jimmy Johnson was one of the Fort Hood Five and went to prison as a draft resistor, a black man.
I know those names very well, as a matter of fact. So thank you all again. Thanks to Marlo for navigating this scene today, and we will be in touch, y'all. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Be well. Stay safe, everyone.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.